Mr. Adi Godrej, Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan, Ajay Sriramji, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, leaders of business and industry, friends, it's an honor for me to be here today. And I'd like to begin by telling you why it's an honor for me. See, there's a tendency to look at India as a country. In our everyday life, we see India as a national structure. But if you go back slightly more than that, go back 100 years, 200 years, you'll find that India actually is energy. It is a force. If you go back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, you would find that that force came from our rivers. Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati. We worshipped these rivers. And the reason we worshipped them was because that was where our energy came from. And everything we had was built on those rivers. Now, we've gone way beyond that. We have built structures that are allowing this energy to rise, to explode. And it's an honor for me to be here, because as this energy moves from India and goes abroad, you are the cutting edge. You are the people on the first line. And you're the people who are our ambassadors. You're the people who tell the world what this energy is about. Over the last couple of years, you have done a tremendous job. The image of India has changed. I went to university in 1991, and I remember nobody thought of India. I remember conversations where people would laugh and say, look, do you have elephants on the road? Nobody's saying that today. And a huge part of that is because of you. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to tell you that it's a big honor for me to be here addressing you. I think the way it's going to work is I'm going to give a little speech, and then we're going to have questions, right? Okay, so I think it was a dark night some years ago when my team and I got on the Gorakhpur Lokmanya Tilak Express and traveled across India's heartland. We wanted to understand how young Indians were building their future. And I spent a large part of the 36-hour journey moving across the train and talking to travelers, youngsters, weary families, and migrants moving from the dust of Gorakhpur to the glitter of Mumbai. It took us 36 hours. It's called an express. Anyway, I remember a young boy from Purvanchal, Girish, who painted the outside of skyscrapers. There were two carpenters, one of them traveling from his village to Mumbai for the very first time. Imagine the feeling of a young fellow getting on the train, coming out of his village, going to Mumbai. Spoke to a young Muslim boy setting out to start his life. He had no idea what work he was going to do. I asked him, boss, what happens if you reach Mumbai and there's nothing for you to do? If I reach Mumbai, there's nothing for me to do. I'll get in a train, I'll go to Bangalore. That's the spirit of this country. Forward-moving, brave. What struck me about that train was the optimism. These were poor people, weak people, but not one of them was pessimistic. They were sitting there saying, "Haan bhaiya, kaam ho jayega. Naukri mil jayegi." And they were all struggling. And this optimism for me is just like India. It's bursting with dreams and fearless ideas, brave ideas. And as it hurtled towards Mumbai, I sat there looking at this train and wondering how many of these dreams will actually be fulfilled. By the time we reached Mumbai, we had made friends with Girish the carpenter. And he told us, "Come and see where I live." And we thought, that's an interesting thing to do. We had come all the way from Gorakhpur, and we thought, let's see what this little young migrant is doing. 4 o'clock in the morning, walk off into the gullies of Bombay, monsoon season, where feet are going into puddles, and then he opens the door. Little room, probably the size, twice the table. 6 people sleeping inside. They get up. All of them are migrants. All of them have done that little journey. All of them have that dream. We had a little chat. Very smart fellow, entrepreneur like all of you, except he had the empty pockets. And he says, come to the chai wala. We go to the chai wala. There's 5-6 of us, and he buys us all tea. And he insisted that nahi, main to kharidunga. That is the spirit of this country. Millions and millions and millions of youngsters struggling every day with optimism. And this story of his, the story of Girish, exemplifies the idea of empowerment. It exemplifies the Indian worker, the Indian entrepreneur. And as we talk here, 1 billion people are breaking their shackles. They're coming out and they're claiming their place in the sun. India is home to the largest pool of human capital the world has ever known, and probably will ever know. And it is this movement of people, this tremendous movement of people and ideas, that is going to define this country in the 21st century. It is this energy that is producing your best managers. It's driving the stock market. And it's the energy providing labor for all your factories. It drives the consumption upon which your businesses are built. Democracy and technology have triggered a non-reversible chain reaction in India. This reaction is now unstoppable. Nobody can stop it. We have to channel this reaction. We are now sitting on an unstoppable tide of human aspiration, a tide so great that it is going to move forward regardless of what we do. But for this massive movement of people and ideas to be truly transformational, we need to nurture it. We need to make it harmonious. We need to make it happen smoothly. We need to use the energy generated by this movement of people and ideas, the force that this movement is generating, and we need to use it to empower everybody. Not one person, not almost everybody, but everybody. The first thing we need to do is we need to accelerate this movement. It is our duty to provide India with the physical infrastructure to enable this unprecedented movement of people and ideas. This infrastructure needs to connect India. It needs to connect Indian villages, it needs to connect Indian cities, and it needs to connect India to the rest of the world. We have to provide the roads on which our dreams are paved. And these roads, they can't have potholes. They can't break down in 6 months. They have to be big roads because they're going to carry strong people. They're going to carry strong forces. We have to provide the ports from which our ideas will set sail. We have to provide the electricity for our children that will light up their future. Government cannot build this infrastructure alone. We are incapable of doing it alone. We need your help. It has to be built jointly, and together we will find the models where capital is used efficiently and without delay. It is critical that the business environment for the creation of this dynamic infrastructure is stable and predictable. Secondly, people were not the only thing moving on that train. Ideas moved with them. And in the 21st century, we need to make ideas move fast. We need to aggressively build the knowledge infrastructure that will support this massive flow of ideas. Together, we must ensure that our knowledge, education, and skills define the global standard. It's not good enough for us to say, we want to be like them. They have to say, we want to be like India. Certainly, we have the seeds of a world-class education system. It's there, but it's small. It needs to be expanded. But that alone is not going to be enough. Today we are mortgaging our future because large parts of our education and training are based on defunct ideas. Ideas that are no longer relevant. The reality is that a lot of the youngsters in the Gorakhpur Lokmanya Tilak Express were not trained, and so are quite difficult for you to employ. You understand this best because you spend enormous amounts of time and money, hard-earned money, to train them. Our problem is not joblessness. It is a lack of training and skills. Why should a mother sleep at night worrying about whether her brilliant child will find a school to go to? Why is it that a degree from Harvard costs the same as the capitation fees of a medical college in Lucknow? Why are our students forced to study obsolete things? I'm a pilot. I learned to fly in the United States. I came back. I wanted to convert my license. So I went to the DGCA and I said, what do I have to do? They gave me the curricula. I opened the book. Large section in the book. How to drop mail from aeroplanes. How many of you are getting your mail dropped from aeroplanes in the sky? It's been a long time since I got that. But we're teaching it to our kids. Guys flying a A340 looks out and they're telling him, listen, you need to know how to drop mail from planes. And this is not only in pilot training. It's everywhere. Look at our textbooks. Open them out. Most of the stuff is not really relevant to what they're going to do. Who knows what they're going to do? You know what they're going to do. Why? Because you're going to give them the jobs. You're the guys who are going to employ them. Do you have a role? Do you have a role in our education curriculum? Do they ask you? Do they? Does someone come to you and say, listen, what do you think? Does it happen? I'm asking. Does it happen systemically? Do you have structures in universities? Not individual relationships. Do you have structures in universities that allow you to impact what the IIT is teaching? Do you? It's a question. You don't. Those are the type of structures that we have to build. Our university structures are closed, they're silos. I meet these guys, they're brilliant guys, absolutely brilliant. But a university today is a network. It's no longer a silo. The network has to be connected to industry. It has to take input from industry. And it's not happening. I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine comes from the United States and he wanted to do some engineering work. And he asked me, what's a good place to go? I said, go to the IITs. This was 5 or 6 years ago. I said, go to the IITs, ask professors there. He goes to the IIT, speaks to a professor solves the problem for him, and he comes out. And he says to me, this is very interesting. I went to the IIT, that guy's a brilliant fellow. He solved my problem for me. I'm like, so what's wrong with that? He said, well, he just charged me a couple of ₹1,000. So I was like, what? So? He says, well, that thing that he solved for me is actually worth $30,000. This guy has no idea about what his value is. He's got no idea about what he's worth. Why? Because he's not connected to the market. He doesn't understand what the market is ready to pay him. He does, but institutionally he doesn't. So we have to change some of this stuff. For the young, the difference between aspiration and empowerment is basically a job. I go to the rural areas and the bottom line is a job. Everything else goes around it, education, but it's all done to support jobs. And that's where you guys come in. You are the people who are going to take the lead for the creation of jobs. What we have to do, what the government has to do, is we have to improve the playing field and create an impartial, professional, and rules-based government system. I've spoken to you about what we need to do to nurture this movement of people. I'd also like to tell you about what I feel threatens this movement of people. What is it that we should worry about? What are the things that can go wrong? Lack of infrastructure is clearly one. Lack of knowledge infrastructure is another one. But for me, the biggest danger is excluding people. Excluding the poor, excluding the middle class, excluding the tribals, the Dalits. And I'm going to tell you why. Whenever we've not embraced the excluded, women, the minorities, Dalits, tribals, we've always fallen backwards. President Kennedy famously said that a rising tide raises all boats. I oversee a women's self-help group movement in my constituency and in Uttar Pradesh. And chatting to them once, I told them this. I said, the President of the United States, he said that a rising tide raises all boats. The woman looks at me and she says, Rahul bhaiya, hamare paas to nao hi nahi hai. A rising tide doesn't raise people who don't have a boat. We have to help build the boat for them. It's not good enough to raise the tide. We have to give them the basic infrastructure to rise with the tide. And what is the basic infrastructure? What is the basic infrastructure? The basic infrastructure, as designed by the UPA, is a rights-based paradigm. Give everybody the basic minimum on a number of key ideas. Give them a basic minimum on the job front. Give them a basic minimum on the education front. Give them a basic minimum on information, which is what Nandan is doing. That is what we are trying to do with the rights-based approach. The rights-based approach is important because it allows people to move. It builds this movement. One of the biggest problems poor people have is identification. If you go to a village, the village knows each other. Everybody in the village knows each other. Uska bhai hai, uski behan hai. When the villager leaves the village, he loses all that information and nobody else has it. So a lot of the ideas that we have are designed to support this movement and make it smoother, more comfortable for people who are going to move. And as I said earlier, this movement is what is driving everything. It is what is driving your businesses. Let me go back to the women for a bit. A second. Yeah. Let me go back to the women. They told me they have no boats. So I've lost it now, 1 second. Okay. They told me they have no boats, but the work our women do, the work millions of Indian women undertake every day, not poor ones, not rich ones, every single one of them. The work they do right now, as we're sitting here in this nice AC'd hall, they're building not only our boats, they are the waves. They are not only building boats, they are the waves. And I, for one, will not speak of growth without speaking of them. Our economic vision must be about more than money. It must be about compassion. We must envision a future for India that leaves no man and no woman outside in the shadows. Embracing the excluded is essential to the wealth of the nation. If we do not embrace them, we will all suffer. It's very simple. In a democracy, the poor have a veto. And we have to carry the poor and the weak with us. India will only move forward with inclusive growth that embraces everyone and is open and attainable to those inside this room and those very, very far outside. Now, there is a strong connection between harmony and growth. I spoke about this energy, this movement, and there are two ways this movement can go. It can go harmoniously, or it can go disruptively. And the idea of the Congress Party is that it should go harmoniously. Everybody should move together happily. There's a strong connection between harmony and growth. India has grown faster under the UPA because we have greatly lowered tensions between communities, made growth more inclusive, and fostered an environment of tolerance and harmony. Anger, hatred, and prejudice do not contribute to growth. Do not underestimate the benefits of harmony. When you play the politics of alienating communities, you stop the flow of movement of people and ideas. And when that happens, we all suffer. Businesses suffer, the seeds of disharmony are sown, and the dreams of our people are severely disrupted. Once begun, this damage takes a very long time to reverse. It is very dangerous to leave people behind. Inclusive growth is a win-win for everybody. We in the Congress Party have been systematically working on creating modern political infrastructure that provides people with voice. By lifting people out of poverty, using our rights approach, we are smoothing out a lot of these flows. As we move forward to meet these challenges, we must remember that we have a tendency in India to think about solving all our problems incrementally. This is a mistake. There are some problems that require exponential solutions. Whenever India has done well, it has done so not by incremental steps, but by radically transforming its structures. Look at our successes, from the Green Revolution to the White Revolution to the IT and telecoms revolution. All those successes were the results of exponential thinking. We are a brave young country. Let's break out of the mode of incremental improvements and get into the mode of generational shifts. Let's stop wondering how many colleges we can build, and let's start discussing what we can do so that the very idea of a college, so that the very idea of a university is transformed. This might sound idealistic to you, but I'm speaking very seriously from India's experience. Look, if we went about the telecoms revolution in the 80s by distributing telephones one by one and going slowly house by house, Sam Pitroda wouldn't be sitting here with us. He would be somewhere in Kalahandi distributing telephones. He wouldn't have that wonderful white hair. He'd be bald. I have no interest in going bald, even though it's looking pretty likely at this stage. So let's get in the business of smart interventions. Your voice and skill set has to go into policy in a systemic way. Sam Pitroda, Krishnamurthy, Sridharan, Nandan Nilekani, they all combined their skills with government to empower people and transform India. What India is thirsting for now is a visionary partnership. A partnership that incentivizes you to provide economic gains for the poor and the millions of aspiring middle class. It is only once this partnership is forged that we will generate the momentum to transform this country. The Congress Party is the only political institution capable of forging this partnership. It is the only party which is inclusive by design and whose core value is promoting harmony. We are committed to creating an open political architecture that is accessible to every Indian. Today we need to forge a new business compact, a new framework that responds to the 21st century. On our part, we will ensure a fair, rules-based and stable environment for entrepreneurs, large and small. An environment where businesses need not compete in the corridors of Harizina Hill, but compete instead on the streets and gullies of our towns and villages. An environment where businesses will thrive by innovating better products and services. The compact should bring the excluded into the economic mainstream. In such an environment, I invite business to help us unleash entrepreneurship and jobs at scale. In this compact, business would commit to play by the rules, protect the environment, and respect the rights of people. We are readying ourselves by developing a new political architecture which will incorporate in a systemic way all voices, including the voices of business. I've come here because I believe in you. I believe that this country cannot move forward without you. I've come here because I want to forge a partnership with you, a long-term partnership to take this country forward. Let us work together to build this brave, empowered new India. Adiji said in his speech that I am somebody who spends a lot of time with poor people. But I want to make one thing very, very clear. India cannot go forward without partnership, without working together. The poor are one component of our country. Business is another component. The middle class is a third component. We have to work with all these components. It's not good enough to say, listen, the poor are important. It's not good enough to say business is important. It's not good enough to say middle class is important or the powerful are important. This country is only going to move forward if we stitch together a coalition where we are all working together. And you're critical to that. Absolutely critical. It cannot be done without you. So that is my message. Thank you for coming here and listening to me. If you have any questions, I'd happily answer them. Can I have a mic? I prefer to walk around if it's okay.
Yeah. Rahulji has kindly agreed to answer a few questions. May I request Mr. Ajay Shriram, who is the Vice President of CII and also the Chairman and Managing Director of DCM Shriram Consolidated Limited, to ask the first question, please.
Thank you, Adi. Rahulji, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and it's wonderful to... Thank you, Adi. Rahulji, it's wonderful to hear you share your thoughts of the vision of India. Thank you very much for coming here and being with us.
Thank you.
The issue which I wanted to ask of how we can further improve is the issue of center-state relationships. Based on our constitution and the federal structure, the states have their own rules and regulations, center has their own rules and regulations, and very often economic development and progress gets hampered because of lack of cohesion or lack of a unified thinking of how to carry a particular project or a particular vision forward. Do you think there's something we can do to actually increase the harmony?
Would you like me to give you the political answer, the actual structural answer? No, it will be honest. Both answers will be honest. One is a structural answer. Practical answer of what is actually going on in the country. Right? And it's slightly complicated, so you'll have to bear with me. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
What's happening in India today, and the key is the 73rd and 74th Amendment. The 73rd and 74th Amendment basically created a third tier of government, a structure below the MLA and the MP. And what is taking place in India is a devolution of power to this third tier. And a lot of the tension you see is actually the tension that is coming, the challenge that is coming actually from the panchayat. Let me give you the numbers, approximate numbers. I'm an MP. I get 5 crores a year. I have 700 pradhans who work with me. Each one of those pradhans is working with a couple of crores. That's the difference in power. I have power to make policy. He has tremendous power at the local level. And what he is saying, the pradhan, he's saying this system is too closed for me. It's not good enough. There's 3 million of us, and we have no voice in this big system. That's the pressure that is driving Manrega. That's the pressure that's driving RTI. That's the pressure that is changing our development paradigm and making it more granular. There is a challenge being thrown to MPs and MLAs by the Pradhan. And our political parties are not designed for Pradhans. They are designed for MPs and MLAs. That's the problem. So because the political, it is not a state center problem. It is actually a devolution of power problem. And until we actually start to build the structures that bring these guys' voices in, we are going to have this type of policy, this type of conflict. What's actually happening, if you want it at the ground level, what's actually happening is that the Pradhan is the builder. He's the guy who does the job in the village. When we fight elections, we go to the Pradhan and we say, support us. But the Pradhan doesn't actually have any power in the political party. That's the problem. And it's a problem that, let me put it bluntly, it's a problem the Pradhan is going to solve. He's not going to worry about whether there's an MP in front of him or an MLA in front of him. He's the last mile. So what we have to do, the architecture we have to build, is one which brings the Pradhan in. And that, frankly, other than the left parties and some of the Dravidian parties, none of the other parties have. So what you're actually seeing is a structure where the grassroots are completely disconnected. They're not connected to the political system. And that's where the dysfunctionality is coming. The Pradhans have the power to change this, and they'll do it. The really interesting question in Indian politics is, can we do something to our political parties so that we can absorb these guys in? And believe me, the moment you absorb these guys in, very simple thing will happen. Higher level policy will be dealt with by the MPs and MLAs. Lower level policy will be dealt with by the Pradhan. And a lot of the problems that are coming in our system today are because I am dealing with low level stuff. That our ministers are doing stuff that is actually not their job. It's the job of a local representative far outside. So until we actually open this political system out, this dysfunction will exist. I don't know if that's a complicated answer, but that's actually the answer.
Thank you. May I ask Dhruv Soni, past president CII, to ask the next question?
See, this is a very important question. But it's not only about water. It's about every single thing. I raised it here about the university curriculum. It's about every single thing. We have not built the systems that actually integrate voice. Tell me something, is there a systematic way for the voice of business to come into government? Not just, I am a friend of Montek's or I know Montek, but a systematic, structural way for you to say, listen, this is what we think, this is what should happen. Is there such a system? No, the CII is not in the politics. You have your own system. And of course, that's a very effective system. I'm saying in the political machine, in the government machine, does such a system exist? Right? And it's not only in business. It's for the poor guy. It's for the local representative. There is no conversation taking place. There is no structural conversation. I sit in on some of the committees in Parliament. Right? The committees call whoever they want. It's totally based on what they feel like. There has to, why isn't there a systematic way that, listen, if we're trying to make this bill, then these are all the people who have to come into the room. Institutionalized. And what I work with and what I struggle with is moving from this paradigm of it's about one man or it's about another man to moving to structures that actually bring in voice. What you're talking about essentially is a lack of the ability to deliver your voice in the system. Institutionally, which is very different. See, 50 years ago, our system was small. You could do it without institutional structures. Now our system is too big. The job of an MP is completely transformed. Even if I compare my job 8 years ago, it is a completely different job. Because the structure has changed. And the system is not responding to the structure. The political parties are not responding to this structure. I've been working in the Youth Congress for 3 years. Let me tell you what we've done. And it's not appreciated because it's not very well understood. And maybe I haven't gone out and explained it in detail. What we've essentially done, do you know what happens, how elections in the United States are fought? When President Obama fought an election, everybody comes in, all members come in and vote. It's called a primary. That is an expression of people's will. People come in and say, I want Sunil to lead this, or I want Montek to lead this. The legislative engine in India is basically 5,000 people. 5,000 people determine everything. Right? How many people choose these 5,000 people? In my party, how many people do you think choose them? There's 4,000 MLAs. There's 600, 700 MPs. These guys drive this country. In my party, in the BJP, in the BSP, if you combine all these parties together, how many people do you think choose these legislators? In the whole country, including, I've done this, in the whole country, including the BJP Congress, pushing it hard, 200 to 300 people. Now, how can you talk about state-center relations if 200 people are defining those Vidhan Sabhas and Lok Sabhas? That's what your problem is. A lot of the dysfunctionality that's coming is because the system is just clogged shut. And a lot of problems that actually you shouldn't be dealing with, which should be on the periphery. You've got to go all the way up the value chain, and they block you all the way up. That's the problem. If you open out that value chain, most of your problems will be solved there. And what this is doing to you is imposing huge costs. And we call it corruption. It's imposing massive costs on you. No one talks about this. People talk about Rahul Gandhi. People talk about, individuals. No one talks about, listen, let's open this thing out. And you open this thing out, large numbers of your problems will be fixed far, far away by lower level people. That's what I'm working on in the Congress Party. How can we bring in voice of people? How can we systematically set up structures so you can talk to us? That's not happening. You're a wonderful institution, right? Where is your counterpart in the government? Inside the government, where is your counterpart that brings people into the committee? It doesn't exist. So you're empowered, but you're actually disempowered. And that's all the way down. That's the poorest guy in the village. He's also disempowered. So those are some of the things that we have to think about as a country. And when I talk about partnership, that's what I'm talking about. Not what my individual view on something is. It's irrelevant. There are 1 billion people in this country. It's not important what Rahul Gandhi thinks. It's important what the billion people think. And that mechanism isn't there, it's not working. So then we go into this model where you're going to have the one guy who's going to come and he's going to fix everything. He's going to come on a horse. That's the model, that's the Indian model. He's going to come on a horse, sun's going to be in the background, there's a billion people waiting, he's coming in, and everything's going to be nice. No, it's not going to work like that. I like to tell the truth. I like to tell the truth, and I like to say what I see. Give me all the power you want. Give one individual all the power you want. Give him everything. He cannot solve the problems of a billion people. Cannot be done. Give a billion people the power to solve their problems. It will be done immediately. And we got to move this debate. I mean, I get frustrated. We got to move this debate. It can't be about one person. The chief minister of Assam has fixed everything. This is ridiculous. It's got to be about what are the structures we are building, what are the machines we are putting into place, how are we bringing voice into the system. And none of that debate takes place. And frankly, I get frustrated. I read the newspapers, I'm like, okay, it's always about a person. It's never about voice of people. It's never about voice of business. It's never about voice of the telecom industry. Systematically, not individually. And listen, if you're expecting Manmohan Singh ji or someone else to solve everything here, you're going to keep expecting it. It's as simple as that. And okay, we can keep expecting it. It's a nice way to move. But if you want to solve it, you got to move from the person. I am irrelevant. I am one out of a billion Indians. So is Montek. So some of the others here. Our power is only going to come when we channel that thing. That river of Indian people. When we channel that thing and when we give that thing voice, then you see the businesses you build. You see what happens. You will be sitting on monsters the size that cannot be imagined. We talk about competing with the Americans, the Chinese, is that. You open up the voice of the Indian people and you see what happens. You see what comes out. You cannot imagine it. Because I go to the villages and I see these people sitting there, nothing is working. There's no road, there's no this, nothing. And they're sitting there and say, Bhaiya, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. I went into this Jhuggi Jhopdi in one of my tours, Maharashtra. Sit down. And woman is sitting there, young, 25. 2 little kids. So I said, what's going on? What are you doing? I'm a manual laborer. Okay. Where's your husband? He's working outside. Okay. I started talking to the kids. I said, what do you want to be? He said, I want to join the IAS. I was like, that's interesting. Another fellow sitting there, I said, क्या करना है? मैं businessman बनना चाहता हूँ. Fine. Then I looked at the mother, I said, listen, it's not happening. You've got this nice dream. It's not working. I look, you're living in a jhopdi. Your husband's there working, manual labor. You're doing manual labor. I wanted to provoke her. See what she said. I said, ये तो नहीं होगा. She says, देखो, मैं काम करती हूँ 8-10 घंटे. वो काम करता है 8-10 घंटे. और ये दोनों भी काम करते हैं. ये आईएएस में जाएगा और ये बिजनेस बनाएगा. Now, she had no reason to say that. To me, this is irrational. I'm on her side. I want her to succeed. I'm saying this is irrational. She doesn't believe that. She's absolutely convinced that India is going to give her the opportunity. That's what you're sitting on. You unleash that, your businesses will go like instantly. What is holding you back, frankly, is that the political system is clogged and it is not responding to you. Why is it that pretty much everything, the smallest decision, has got to be taken by the senior most guy? Why? Sometimes I look, I'm sitting there and I'm an MP. I'm doing the job of a Pradhan. Somebody is saying to me, Bhaiya, road chahiye. It's not my job. But the system is so closed that Pradhan actually doesn't have the ability to do the job. So what you got to do is, road banani hai, chalo bhaiya, Lucknow chalo. That's your problem. It's an advantage. If we want to speak openly, there are advantages that arise out of it. But you are not seeing the massive disadvantage that arises out of it. It's much bigger. Because you are forced to deal all the way up the value chain. And as you go up the value chain, it's more and more complicated. So that's how I see it. People say, my guys have told me in our conversation, they said, listen, don't go into the India-China cliche. Don't go into it. I'm not going to listen to them. I want to go into it for a reason. See, there are two types of systems. There is a centralized system and there is a decentralized system. China is a centralized system. They call it the dragon. You can see it, it's very clear. It's big, it's powerful. It builds big structures that are visible. And people call us an elephant. They mean that comparison, they call it the elephant and the dragon, right? They call it an elephant. We're not an elephant. We're a beehive. We're a beehive. And it's funny, but think about it. I'll tell you why we're a beehive. Which one is more powerful? An elephant or a beehive? No. Between an elephant and a beehive, which is more powerful? No, the answer is they can't be compared. The power applies itself in a completely different way. We have to understand what we are. We have to understand where our power comes from. I went to one of these talks and the Chinese Prime Minister's secretary came up to me. Can you just come here one second? The Chinese Prime Minister's secretary came up to me and she said, sorry, he's the secretary. So the Chinese Prime Minister's secretary came up to me in one of these talks and she says to me, Mr. Gandhi, tell me, sorry, I hope you don't mind. She says, tell me, Mr. Gandhi, why is it that everyone worries about China and nobody worries about India? So I said, well, why don't you tell me? And she says, Mr. Gandhi, because China is more powerful than India. I said, that's interesting. I said, show me your hand. Sorry, I'm going to have to do this. I said, show me your hand. I said, you see, this is how China applies power. When I apply power like this, he feels it. He understands it. And he says, hey, you're holding my hand. You're pressing me down. Now, this is how India applies power.
Very true. Very true.
Right? Now, she looked at me and she was like, she looked at me and she actually saw it, she realized it. We are actually much more powerful than we think. Except, we just don't apply power in a centralized way. There are people doing yoga in New York, dancing around. That's Indian power. You go to a nightclub somewhere in Spain, and there's Amitabh Bachchan on the screen there dancing around. That's Indian power. That's the power of the beehive. Nobody sees it. Sits there, works quietly, little bit of noise in the beehive, that buzzing sound that you hear all the time, bhaiya, this complexity that we're having to deal with. What do we do with this? Montek, it drives him nuts. Right? It drives me nuts. I look at the newspapers, I'm like, why are we talking about these things? This is not important. Opening up the political system is important. Voice is important. Why are we talking about Aishwarya Rai's wedding? Why are we dealing? This is noise. This is the noise of a decentralized system. And this thing that stresses you out, this noise that stresses you out, it stresses me out. It stresses Mr. Bajaj out. It stresses all of us out. And actually it drives the foreigners crazy. Because they're not used to it. Some of these MIT guys came to see me the other day. They sat down and they said, Mr. Gandhi, what is this place? Why are Indians always complaining? Indians are always complaining because they're dealing with complexity. That's what we do, that's what we specialize in. There's no complexity in China. No complexity in China. I'll tell you a story. One fellow came, a friend of mine came from China, Italian guy. He was in shock. Just stunned. So I asked him what happened. He says, I was on a bus in China. The bus hit a man. The driver picked up the man and put him on the side of the road, and we carried on. No complexity there. Simple. It is. Right? India is complex. And the answers we come up with, the answers Sam comes up with, the answers Jindal comes up with, these are robust answers. They're not simple answers. And the West looks at us and says, give us simple answers. Boss, our environment is not simple. We cannot give you simple answers. But what's happening? And this is what I see as our strength. This is why I'm saying the beehive is a good analogy. What is happening is that all of you are masters of complexity. You're all masters of complexity. You understand complexity. And you're entering a century of complexity. Simple answers in a connected world will not work. This buzzing sound that you don't like, these newspaper stories that drive me nuts, this is your training. This is teaching you to deal with complexity. And this is what is going to give you a competitive advantage like nobody has ever had before. When you go out into the world, and you've dealt with this complexity, and you're dealing with your counterparts in the United States, you're dealing with your counterparts in France and Germany, you're people who are trained in complexity, dealing with people who are trained in simplicity. I'll tell you who'll win. You will win. So a lot of the times we get all worked up and we say, why is this thing not working? So disturbing. There are a lot of things that we need to fix. Structural things, highways, things are slow. And we need to speed them up. It's not good enough to say, complex hai to bhaiya kuch nahi karo. No. You have to push the envelope. You have to do the things Sam did. You got to do the things Nandan did. And you got to push the envelope. But don't forget that all this complexity that actually is stressful, gives us the highest heart attack rates, gives us diabetes, this is very, very good training for a connected world. No better training than this. And if you can thrive here, and if you can build here, like all of you have done, if you can do it here, I'm not worried you can do it on the moon. So that is the strength of India. It is a completely different system than the American system or the Chinese system or the Japanese system. It is a decentralized system, and its power is soft, unheard, unseen, but it's there. So those are some of the things I wanted to tell you. It's been quite interesting for me, and frankly, I should do this much more often. You get tags in India. See, it's the complexity, simplicity thing. You get a tag. He only cares about poor people. He only cares about rich people. He only cares about middle class people. He's somebody who looks at Dalits. He's somebody who looks at, tribals. But the reality is that these definitions, these tags, they're just pieces of paper. They're just tags. I have one aim in my life. Okay? It's an accident of fate. I happen to come from a chain of people. DNA, it's the DNA. I come from a chain of people. I've been put in this situation. I've been told, boss, here you are. Okay. Now, I'll tell you one thing. We have to move in this country from that old idea. The idea we love of the guy on the horse. There's a guy who's going to come on the horse and he's going to come charging through, and we do it all the time. He's going to come charging through and everything in India is going to be fixed. It's not. Said it before. We talk about, I go to Jhansi, I see Rani ki Jhansi. She's a hero. She's a hero. We consider her a hero. But what we forget is that she wasn't the only hero. She's just a representative of those heroes. You don't see those millions of other heroes who actually did the charge. You just see that one hero. What I want to do in my life is very simple. I want to I want to help Indian people give their voice. Wherever I see it. Doesn't matter if it's, Montek or Sunil. Doesn't matter if it's the poorest guy sitting in a village in Amethi. I don't care. The power of this country is 1 billion plus voices. And until we start listening to them, and until we start pushing them into the system, we are not going to generate our true power. That's why I don't like this politics of I'll keep these people out. Let's keep the Biharis out of Mumbai. Just beat them up when they come. Just trash them. How dare the Biharis come into Mumbai? Absolutely not. Or huge communities. 200 million people. Muslims. You say they don't exist. So we're going to keep them out of the system. It is not sustainable. It is a complete waste of our energy. We have to take everybody together. That is our power. In fact, not only do we have to take everybody who is ours together, we've got to take them all. Our idea is so big that it can carry not only India, it can carry everybody else. And what is the idea? It's a different idea than the idea that prevails in the United States. The idea in India, which was told to us by Gandhiji, repeated again and again and again and again for those who want to hear it, is is written in the Gita. Buddha spoke about it. The idea is compassion. What is compassion? It's just listening, nothing else. It's just listening to what the other person is saying. Not putting a label on him that, boss, he's a rich man, he's a poor man, he's a fool, he's intelligent. No, just listen. Just go out there and listen. If we just start doing that and listening to every single person in this country, this thing will build itself so fast, you won't know what's happened. I'm proud to be an Indian. I love this complexity. It drives me crazy. You know, I got press guys asking me, when you're getting married. Somebody else saying, boss, when you're going to be PM. Somebody saying, no, you're not going to be PM. Somebody saying, maybe you will be PM. There's a good possibility. It's like the American polling charts. You know, this is looking at a 47.3% possibility that he might be PM. These are all irrelevant questions. It's all smoke. The only relevant question in this country is, how can we give our people voice? That's it. Now, I've taken enough of your time. I promise to come back. I'd just like to end by saying one thing. You're the cutting edge in the 21st century. The world has turned. They used to look at us and they used to say, boss, Hindu rate of growth, 3%. India's stuck in this forever. They've been doing it for 3,000 years. Now the Hindu rate of growth is the European rate of growth. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. We need to work with everybody. When I say voice, I don't mean just Indian voice. And this is something that we've stopped doing the way we used to. I mean everybody's voice. I mean going to your enemy, your worst enemy, and listening to him and saying, what is it that you're saying? Maybe I'm misunderstanding you. Say it again so I can hear it properly. And this is what we have to get in the habit of doing. Too often we just turn around and say, no, I know it, we know it. This is not our culture. Our ideas flow out of this country when we listen. Go to Japan. Gentleman sitting here in Bihar, 3,000 years ago, fundamentally changed their life because he listened. That's all he did. So when you're doing your work, and you guys are hard-nosed businessmen, I'm not such a hard-nosed politician, but I'm getting there. I don't want to be one. I think it's sad to be a hard-nosed politician. But you're a hard-nosed businessman. Listen to people. Listen to your opponents. Make them your friends. And embrace the complexity of this country. Thank you.